There are various people in the world who collect various things, and some of them collect extremely dangerous items. This is a story about a thief mom who, without any knowledge, got involved in a dangerous collection and experienced a shocking turn of events. Listen to the story of how a neighbor's thief mom ruined her life with my husband's collection. My husband and I were a couple in our 5th year of marriage. I was a housewife and my husband worked in a research job handling chemicals. My husband was really knowledgeable in various fields, and I respected him for that. We moved to this town 5 years ago because we wanted to live in a comfortable area after getting married. It wasn't really that much of the countryside, but it was peaceful, and everything we needed was pretty much available near the station. We didn't have children, and since we could spend our money freely, we enjoyed our respective hobbies. My hobby was going to cafes, hot springs, and collecting trinkets, which didn't cost much money. On the other hand, my husband collected many things. He was into different things at many different times, and he had many collections at home, such as fossils and ores. My husband also collected plastic models and figures. We always had a lot of things in the house. I could sort of understand his fascination with fossils and such, but one of his cherished collections was dangerous. It was a so-called flammable substance, and I didn't know much about it, but he had been collecting magnesium and metal power little by little. It wasn't something that anyone could buy. You needed a license to handle dangerous items. My husband had obtained the license some time ago, and he was able to collect these things. I was surprised to hear that even a small amount of them could easily cost like $50. I thought it would be better to spend money on delicious food instead, but I couldn't interfere with his hobby. He didn't seem to have bought enough to violate any regulations, so I let him do as he pleased. He stored them in a case suitable for them because he didn't want our house to catch on fire. Although we managed the safety well, we caught up in an incident one day when a familiar neighbor saw me while I was shopping and came running towards me. "Emily, what happened to your window?" "Huh? Window? Oh, you didn't know? Your living room window is broken." "Huh? Really?" "It seems like there have been a lot of burglaries in our area lately. I wonder if your house was targeted too." "Oh no. I'll go check it out." Saying that, I hurried home. As my neighbor had said, the window in the living room was broken. No. I was stunned by the sight, but I had become curious about what had been stolen, so I decided to check my bank cards and valuables. On the shelf in the living room, there was whiskey that my husband had collected, but there were no scratches on the shelf, and there was no sign of theft. All of the bank cards in the drawer were safe, and there seemed to be no significant damage. I wonder why the burglar came in. Then, I wondered, but I noticed footprints clearly left in the living room. The footprints continued up to the 2nd floor. My husband's room and our bedroom were there. Although there was nothing particularly valuable there was a possibility that the burglar was waiting there to attack me when I returned. Feeling anxious about what to do if the burglar was still there, I immediately contacted my husband, who was at work. Fortunately, he was able to answer the phone right away. "Hi, what's up?" "It seems like our house has been broken into. The footprints go up to the 2nd floor, so they might still be there." "What? All right, I'll be right there. You should get out of the house right now." "Okay." After hanging up the phone, I immediately left the house and waited for my husband to come home. About 30 minutes later, he arrived. I told him that his whiskey collection was safe and that nothing valuable was stolen. However, when I mentioned that the footprints in the living room led to the 2nd floor where his collection and stock of chemicals for work were, his face suddenly changed. Indeed, his room contained not only his collection, but also a stock of chemicals that were difficult to obtain and some that were highly dangerous. Some of these chemicals could cause serious damage if stolen and used by amateurs who did not understand their properties. Both my husband and I had planned to wait for the police to arrive, but he was concerned about his collection and decided to return home to confirm what was stolen. The footprints appeared to have gone through the bedroom and then returned before entering my husband's room. When he opened the door, he found that the room had been ransacked. He frantically checked what was stolen, and he gradually turned pale. "It's not here. This is bad." "What did they steal?" Magnesium, metal powder, and sulfuric acid. Are you kidding me? Those are hazardous materials. What are we going to do? I kept them here, but they're all gone. They're dangerous if handled incorrectly. Although he had put them in a fire-resistant case for safety, he had not locked it so they could be easily accessed in case of an emergency. Unfortunately, this made it easier for the thieves to take all of his dangerous materials. Emily, we have to call the fire department too. It could cause a fire. All right, I'll call them right away. I immediately contacted the fire department. Magnesium and metal products are highly flammable and could cause a fire, so it seemed like a good idea to notify the fire department just in case. Also, if someone misuses it and causes a fire, the fire department will contact us about the culprit. The sulfuric acid was something he used for work, but he temporarily brought it home when his department changed. It was all in a glass bottle labeled as hazardous materials, so whoever stole it must have known it was dangerous. A few minutes later, the police arrived and began searching the house. The police said the investigation would take time, so they told us to stay somewhere else for the night. We decided to go to my parents' house. My husband was worried and restless even after we got there. He seemed anxious about the possibility of something happening with his collection of hazardous materials. However, I was a little curious about why someone would steal hazardous materials. Honestly, the valuable things in our house were not in a safe, so they could have easily found them. Yet, the burglar did not take any valuable items, but instead took hazardous materials from my husband's room. That was strange. The burglar broke into the living room window, but did not search the living room, and immediately went upstairs. I started to think that the culprit knew my husband was collecting hazardous materials. But my husband had no idea who could be targeting his hazardous materials and only told a few colleagues about his collection. Those colleagues did not know where we lived, so it would be almost impossible for them to break in and steal. Most importantly, I was worried about what the thief might do with the stolen chemicals. We had no idea why they would steal hazardous materials in the first place, which made my husband even more anxious. 2 days after the burglary, the police called us to say they had found the culprit. Do you recognize this person? No, I don't. Suddenly, the woman became angry and shouted at me. It's all your husband's fault that I ended up like this. You better take responsibility. I'll sue you for damages. She stood up and tried to grab me, but the police restrained her. I couldn't see her face because it was covered with bandages, but I recognized her voice. Are you Ines? What? Ines? You're kidding me, right? Yes, Ines is a famous thief mom in the neighborhood. Originally, she had a bad reputation in the neighborhood because she would take anything she could get her hands on and make it her own, so she was quite disliked. She was the type of person who would take anything given to her. She would be scolded for taking stacks and stacks of coupons from the supermarket, or taking cabbage leaves that were thrown away in the produce section. Although she wasn't from a very poor family, she gave the impression of someone who lived by taking things from others. Since our house was near her house when we first moved in, people in the neighborhood used to warn us. You should be careful of Ines. Recently, she had been causing trouble by going to her acquaintances' houses and taking food ingredients or causing a commotion by saying she took potted plants from their gardens. Ines's family consisted of her husband, her son, and her son's mother-in-law, but I've never heard of her getting scolded by her family, so I thought maybe her whole family was a bunch of bad people. She had half of her face covered with bandages, and only her left eye was visible, so I had no idea what had happened to her. But maybe my husband knew. Ines couldn't control her anger and kept spitting out insults at my husband. You criminal! Why did you have such dangerous things at home? You were probably up to no good. If I tell the truth, you'll be arrested and sent to prison right away. Be prepared to pay plenty of compensation. Ines continued to belittle my husband, ignoring what she had done. We were amazed by her arrogance. Although we were worried about what might happen if the stolen dangerous items were used improperly, we strangely found ourselves satisfied with the fact that Ines was the culprit. She was causing such a commotion that the police officers took her to another room. There we heard the shocking truth from the officers. It turned out that Ines had broken into our house because of my conversation with a neighbor about my husband's hobby. Your husband is always working hard. But on his days off, he sleeps all the time. He seems to be buying all kinds of chemicals, and it's expensive. Well, it's for work, so what can you do, right? Well, it's more like a hobby, you know. He bought some really expensive chemicals the other day. Ines overheard this conversation and snuck into our house, thinking of stealing the chemicals, which she believed could be sold at a high price. She was only thinking about selling the chemicals at a high price and was not concerned about the danger labels on each bottle. When she brought the chemicals home, she tried to open a bottle of sulfuric acid, but her hand slipped and half of the acid spilled on her face. Unfortunately, the acid was not just ordinary sulfuric acid, but fuming sulfuric acid, which is stronger. About half of the contents of the bottle splashed onto her face, causing her skin to melt. According to the doctor who examined her, the acid had penetrated not only the surface but also the internal tissue, and the meaty part had turned black and charred. She had also lost her vision in her right eye because the acid got into it. At that time, Ines was writhing in pain and was not thinking about other dangerous items she had stolen. In the meantime, the metal powder and magnesium that she had stolen had come into contact with the air and ignited, causing a fire in the room. When she realized it, her room seemed to have turned into an inferno, and although she couldn't see well, she escaped by following the handrail. The stolen metal powder ignites spontaneously when it comes into contact with the moisture in the air. That's why you have to be careful not to let that happen. But she probably didn't know about it, so she handled it carelessly. By the way, what was stolen this time was metal powder and magnesium, but there was also phosphorus sulfide in my husband's room. If that had been stolen, toxic gas would have been generated because poisonous hydrogen sulfide is produced when it comes into contact with hot water. I now understand that chemicals require proper knowledge. The report was made by a neighbor who found Ines collapsed in front of the house and called an ambulance. In the end, the house burned down and the fire spread to nearby houses. Although Ines managed to escape from the house, her husband's mother, who lived with them and had a bad leg, could not escape and died. Some say they heard her voice from outside the house crying for help, and that Ines abandoned her and fled. I guess no one trusts her. Considering that she was injured, it's understandable that she couldn't help her mother-in-law. Oh, did that happen? That's why you have to be careful. When my husband heard about what happened to Ines, he was holding his head in his hands as he had feared the worst. Although he was not at fault, he would inevitably feel responsible. Moreover, given his job, it seemed like he knew what state Ines was in without even asking. It's a case of reaping what you sow for Ines, though. In addition, according to what I heard from the neighbors, Ines had caused trouble before and had a difficult relationship with her son and husband. In particular, when people had found out that Ines was his mother, he was told, "Your mother is seriously dangerous," and he became an outcast in his class. It seemed that her misdeeds were well known. There were probably many victims among her son's friends' families, too. Her husband told her that if disputes with the neighbors continued, they would divorce, and as a result of this incident, their son and husband left. Well, they kinda had to because the house burned down. Since she had to pay compensation for the damage caused by the fire spreading to the nearby houses, Ines was worried about what would happen to her from now on. She was also blamed quite a bit by her son and husband for causing the fire and the death of her husband's mother. "Why are you alive and not my mother? You should have been the one who's dead." It seems that Ines was subjected to quite harsh words. There were apparently no words of concern about her injuries as they were the result of her own foolish actions. Although my husband said it was strange that her family wasn't worried despite her blindness, I think that's because she caused them a lot of trouble. In the end, once the divorce with her husband was finalized, Ines left with her son. We considered filing a complaint, but we decided not to because we felt she had received sufficient punishment. Even though Ines did some foolish things out of ignorance, we felt we also had some responsibility for having the chemical in our possession. It seems the aftermath of this incident was quite significant. The divorce of Ines and her husband led to the discovery of welfare fraud, which resulted in the immediate termination of their benefits, and they now have to repay what they have received. We were able to live peacefully for a while after the incident, but one day, Ines began to harass our family. She put up a sign that read "murderer," "criminal," "madman" on our front door and started coming to our house and making a scene, demanding money because it was our fault. Of course, the neighbors knew the real situation, so they reported Ines's behavior to the police right away and offered to let me stay at their house. "Emily, your family can stay at our place tonight if you want," our neighbor kindly said to us. In all likelihood, Ines lost her welfare benefits and was having financial difficulties. She probably thought she could get compensation from us. Ines was coming to our house so frequently that we eventually decided to file a complaint with the police. As a result, she was taken into custody and we didn't see her for a while. It seems she had some psychological problems and was considering hospitalization for mental illness. Perhaps she had been driven to the brink by thoughtless words from her son and husband. After about 6 months, everyone had forgotten about Ines and was living their lives. Rumors had it that she had indeed been institutionalized for mental illness, and that her ex-husband had been contacted, but he had refused to take responsibility for her. I guess that's good news, because if she's in a mental hospital, she won't be able to come back for a while. Since then, my husband has moved his collection of dangerous goods to his workplace. There, security is tight, and the risk of theft is low. There was also the possibility that we could end up like Ines if we made a mistake, so I was finally relieved. But it seemed like my husband was getting rid of his collection little by little and wasn't buying new ones. Instead, he started a new hobby of collecting insects. Before I knew it, the room was filled with specimens, with butterflies, bees, and many other insects lined up everywhere. I don't like bugs, so I try not to get too close to this room. Anyway, thank you to those who listened to me. It's not dangerous anymore, but I kind of wish she had gotten hooked on something else. I wonder what the thief mom, whose life changed dramatically because of her ignorance, is thinking now that she has lost everything. We will continue to introduce interesting truths about the world in the future. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel. I'll see you in the next video. Thank you for watching.